It's Thursday, April 17th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast. It is a hell of a day to talk ball. And joining me to do just that, for the final prospect deep dive of this draft season, it is Charles McDonald. Charles, what's going on, buddy?
Hello. This is my second podcast of the day. You should check out the other podcast we do with Nate Tice, Football 301. Recorded episode of that earlier today. Planted some flags on draft prospects. So we're tidying up here. You know, the finish line is in sight. What is it? We're at 7 days and 4 hours until the NFL draft is kicking off. So I'm certainly ready for it. So I don't know about you, but ready to get these takes off and then try to hit cruise control until the big dance next week.
Yeah, man, we are in the final stages. We're crossing I's, dotting T's, the whole thing, making sure our final, for me at least, getting some eyes on some day 3 receivers who are absolutely never going to matter in the NFL, making sure I just get a catalog of those players. But yeah, man, we are in the final stretch right now today. As you are watching this, we are live on YouTube, we're live on Facebook, we're live on Twitter. You might just be listening to the podcast, which in case, hey, shout out to you. We appreciate the hell out of the audience, the audio audience. But the NFL draft is 1 week away, as Charles mentioned. And speaking of the NFL draft, big announcement, not really a new announcement, but big official promo here. We have tons of great draft content coming all next week. But most importantly, Charles McDonald himself, me, Nate Tice, and Jason Fitz will be doing a live draft show for the first round. And then the second night, second round, third round on Friday. It's a great time to download the Yahoo Sports app before the NFL draft next week. We've added some live activities on iOS. So if you're an iPhone bro, you can definitely do that. You can watch each draft pick come directly through your lock screen. And you can also check out our full draft coverage, grades, plus watch those Thursday and Friday night live draft streams inside the Yahoo Sports app. So you can download it right now on the App Store or at yahoosports.com/NFL draft. I mean, Charles, that is a packed draft schedule right there. That's a lot of our faces right there, buddy. So I am very much looking forward to this. We did a draft show last year and it was really awesome, but I could not be more excited to have you and Nate joining the proceedings. I will say this: last year we had Damian Harris. Shout out to Damian Harris. He was great. He rocked a crochet shirt, like a full kind of see-through situation. So my question to you, Charles, is: will you be wearing any sort of see-through type situation on the show on Thursday or Friday night?
No, I guess just my reaction to the Falcons pick. Probably that'll be it. It's the only see-through thing I'm wearing. But no, I'll be my usual get up. Joggers, t-shirt. Keep it simple. Keep it classy. I'm not built like Damian Harris, so I'm still working on it.
Yeah, you'll get there though. Don't worry about it. 1 week together. Maybe we'll hit the gym at the Yahoo office together, me and you. But enough of that. Let's put a bow on our draft deep dive series here, Charles. We've done quarterbacks, we've done running backs, we've done wide receivers. Today we're going to finish it up with half of like the real football players, as you say, Charles. We're going to talk offensive linemen, but we are also going to talk tight ends. Let's dive into the tight ends here. Just the class as a whole, Charles. And I do want to kind of get your perspective on whether this is a deep class or not. But first and foremost, is it kind of we're coming off the success of Brock Bowers' rookie season. And I just want to know if you think it is unfair to put expectations even in the galaxy of what Brock Bowers did on any of these rookie tight ends.
Hell yeah, that's crazy. I mean, he was flat out one of the best offensive players in the entire league last year. So I don't think that's a fair expectation. Also, Brock was different because I remember I was watching that Brock Bowers freshman year. Georgia beat the crap out of Michigan in the college football playoff that year, and I remember I was watching the game with my dad, and he goes, "Who's 19?" I was like, "Oh, it's Brock Bowers. He's a freshman, if you can believe it." He was like, "Wow, if that was you, that would be your last college football game." So like Brock Bowers was ordained by casual fans 3 years ago. It's not. I don't think it's fair to put anyone in that era. But there's some good prospects at the top of this class this year.
No doubt. And I think one thing that we have to kind of, I don't want to say this is like disrespectful to Brock Bowers at all when I say this, but we do also remember that last year, basically the Raiders just ran the entire offense through him, and it wasn't a very good offense. Although I did at times like what the Turners did towards the end of the season when Norv and Scott Turner were doing like a cute little thing up there, father and son in the big box. But they didn't have like any outside receiver presence, right? After they traded Devontae Adams. Could not run the ball a lick either. So basically the entire offense was, how many ways can we get this thing to Brock Bowers? And obviously that was great for Brock Bowers from a production standpoint, but like, am I crazy, Charles? But I don't know, like that he might, hypothetically, they get another receiver in the mix here this year. They improve the run game with Ashton Genty maybe as the first round pick by the Raiders, or just a general. Chip Kelly improves the run game. Can't possibly go anywhere but up from the worst run game in the NFL. I think it's actually pretty fair to say we might not see Brock Bowers get close to 150 targets again, just because of the circumstances, nothing to do with him. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind. We talk landing spots for these top two guys here in just a second.
Yeah, I think that's a fair take. And I think what's impressive what Brock did last year is he showed he can carry the workload and be, even if like, oh, we're running the offense through Brock Bowers, he still had some pretty absolutely remarkable moments. And at least he showed, I'm a player as a rookie who is 21 years old. I can carry that 150 target, threshold. Is it conducive for the best offense for the Raiders? I don't know. But, maybe you get Brock like with another year in the NFL, you drop some of the targets, maybe some of the efficiency rises, because he did have, some of those like 10 catch, 90, 80 yard games every sprinkled in there every once in a while. But such a high floor to start off from. And I'm looking forward to see what these upcoming class do this year, although it's not fair to put them in the Brock Bowers tier, because like we were talking about Brock when he was 18-year-old freshman.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, Brock Bowers is different. I'm totally willing, by the way, from a fantasy standpoint with Brock Bowers, to say goodbye to some of those targets if we do get an efficiency boost. But that's enough about Brock Bowers and unfair expectations. And again, I think this is interesting to sort of juxtapose with the top two guys this year. Let's start talking Tyler Warren here out of Penn State. 6'5", 256, shout out Mechanicsville, Virginia, baby. So Tyler Warren, very different prospect than a guy like Brock Bowers. But tell me what you like about Tyler Warren, who is generally seen as the consensus top tight end in this year's class.
Oh man, I think there's just a lot. There's a lot to like in terms of the athleticism, the size, like the movement ability. I thought it was interesting. Like if you go back kind of through his career, he basically broke out this year and had some flashes last year, but this was the big year. And it's just kind of interesting when you see a guy that big, that athletic, not really get going until his final year in college. But I don't really know how much, if I'm going to hold that against him at all. This is a special dude, man. A guy is kind of built different when the team is giving him like wildcat snaps at quarterback, and he's averaging, a good, decent amount yards per carry, scoring touchdowns. So I think that even just shows the athleticism that he possesses at, 6'6", 260 pounds, 255 pounds, which is, I think that's something you can immediately bank on in the NFL. Like that kind of being maybe like a mismatch nightmare for linebackers and safeties if you're going to dial in and get him some design touches where you can get the ball and run out in space. I don't think he's the greatest inline guy, but in terms of blocking, but like you can say that about so many guys that we're going to talk about today. That like I almost wonder if we're just kind of moving towards like skill sets first, like what can you do with the ball in your hands? How do you look running routes and catching over some of the blocking stuff? Because, you would think for a guy that big and for someone I've seen him be compared to Rob Gronkowski. That's crazy. You would like Rob Gronkowski's one. He was like a 6 offensive tackle with the receiving stuff. So that's not quite Tyler Warren, but explosive receiving option. I think more than worthy of a first round pick.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely a first rounder. I want to talk about the production here as we're showing on the screen right now. 104 catches, over 1,200 yards, and 8 touchdowns. I mean, absurd from a production angle. He was 7th in the FBS in receiving yards last year. So he was up there with some of the most productive receivers from this year's draft class. Like he had more receiving yards than Kyle Williams, than Jalen Knoll, than Jaden Higgins. A lot of guys who are going to get drafted high at the receiver position this year. He was just straight up more productive. But if you look at him, and also by the way, he scored 4 rushing touchdowns as well, as Charles mentioned. Like they would line him up all over the place. But if you look at like his career, it's pretty crazy that in 2021 he had 6 for 62. In 2022 he had 10 for 123, 3 touchdowns. The year before in 2023 he had 422 yards and then 7 touchdowns. But this really was an explosion production season from him in his final collegiate season. I would say that for people who are concerned about that, and I have seen some people note that is a concern, there were some good tight ends on this Penn State roster, guys who are starting in the NFL right now. Theo Johnson was a good prospect in last year's class. He was kind of ahead of him. Even like Brenton Strange, who's currently, I guess the Jaguars starting tight end with.
Yeah, he was a second round pick.
Yeah, he was a second round pick, and he did. He definitely banged me in fantasy last year, but he had that one good week the week before I started him in fantasy. So what can you do? He's clearly capable of producing, not when it matters for me. But that's part of like the explanation. Maybe it's an excuse, but I think it's more of an explanation for why Tyler Warren wasn't productive. But I want to talk about like the nature of his production this year, Charles, because when I went back to watch him, I kind of had this, I guess, image in my mind of him and what I'd heard from other people as, like you said, this traditional tight end, like 6'5", over 260, tough guy from Penn State. I thought he was much more of like a designed touches sort of guy at tight end, which is really an anomaly. Does that concern you at all when projecting him to the next level?
Not really, because like there's definitely a fair amount of schemed up stuff, but I think when you watch him and the way he moves, like in and out of his cuts, and like sometimes you can just get like break down slot receiver or slot cornerbacks and linebackers and get open. I'm not really too concerned about it. I tend to view it as a plus because you have this guy who is this big and athletic, and you want to get him the ball in so many different ways. Like I obviously I know the rushing stuff is not going to be a big part of his NFL repertoire, but this year he carried the ball 26 times, 218 yards. That's 8.4 yards per carry. And like you said earlier, he scored 4 touchdowns. So there's really only so many guys at that size that can do stuff like that. And I do think it translates to the route running that you see from him, even if it's on some design stuff. And I think when you look at how Penn State's offense was set up, you have a quarterback who's a little shaky, your receivers aren't all that good, or maybe not as good as in years past, but you have this. So why not scheme a bunch of touches to him?
Yeah, so you seem like you're pretty high on what he can be as a route runner, even if it's a little bit of a projection just based on the movement skills here. I think I can see that as well. I think his landing spot's going to be pretty important in terms of like what we're talking about from a production ceiling, because I don't know, you tell me if you think this is wrong, but I thought he kind of, or at least I think he could be used in a way like the Lions use Sam Laporta, who's another guy that kind of gets a reputation as like he's a good blocker because he comes from Iowa, and I think that's like the only reason. But for the most part, like he's more of a mismatched receiving weapon. That's just my opinion about Laporta's blocking. I know Andy Behrens, if he's watching this right now, which is unlikely, but if he is, he's like pulling his hair out over me saying that. But like I see spots for Tyler Warren where, hey, what about 7 with the Jets? Tanner Engstrand coming from that team, the Detroit Lions, like could they use a mismatch weapon? They definitely need, we talked about with Danny Heifetz on the last episode, they definitely need a pass catching option. The Bears at 10, I think that's actually kind of ideal because they have an inline guy in Cole Kmet. That could just be another receiving weapon for Caleb Williams there. Those are 2 spots, at least to me, Charles, where I think you could design him some stuff that like we can clear space out with some receivers here, better receivers than the Raiders had last year at times with Brock Bowers. We can clear some space out and then let him do some damage underneath as a run after catch option. He's a real weapon.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The way I kind of look at where Tyler Warren is, and I really do like the Sam Laporta comp because I as good as Sam Laporta is, I do think that he was a big beneficiary of the scheme in Detroit. Like some of these offenses, they just figure out how to get guys butt naked open on a crosser route or an over route, and that's where Sam Laporta lived. But like, if you can figure out how to scheme that open consistently, then all of a sudden you have this giant guy who's fast as hell and good with the ball in his hands, screaming down the secondary, which is what I thought that works well for the Laporta comp. It works well for a potential Chicago fit with Ben Johnson. And I think that it's kind of all over Tyler Warren's tape at Penn State. Like, there's a lot of quick hitters like up the seam, where they're doing like little out routes where they can just get the ball in his hands and let him run downfield. I don't, like I said before, I don't really view that as a negative necessarily, because he's just so big and athletic. Even if he's not going to be maybe the most physically overwhelming, like dominant singular force like Rob Gronkowski was, or some of that nature, there's still so much value here as a receiver. And if I can scheme some touches, and we got this 6'6" guy who can really handle the ball against much smaller players, I think that's going to be a win. But I will say, I think he's probably close to a finisher piece on a offense that has some guys more than maybe where you start out with.
Right, which is why I thought like the Rams trading up for him would be pretty interesting. I mentioned that on the last episode as well. And just one other team. What about this team doesn't need him, but just in terms of like using him in the way that I think is best, like a lot of what the Dolphins did with Jonnu Smith last year, where they clear so much space with the receivers, and it's just like, well, there's Jonnu Smith, and that guy can rumble after the catch. And that's where I really think Tyler Warren would be kind of I love the way you said it, the finishing piece. And just last thing on the Sam Laporta stuff, and then we can move on to the next tight end here. This is one of the reasons I think it's tough with tight ends, man, is like, and again, Charles, I want your opinion on this. Like, to me, most NFL passing games aren't built to like flow through a tight end, and this is part of the reason why, one of the many reasons why I don't chart the position along with wide receivers is because they're just very different. Like, conceptually, most of the first three plays are going to go to your perimeter receivers. Like, with tight ends, it's so difficult from not only a deployment perspective, like, are they an inline guy or are they like a big slot? And if they're a big slot, are you Dalton Kincaid, where you're not even better than the team's slot receiver who they took in the damn 5th round in Khalil Shakir? But also, just again, this is why Sam Laporta takes that big step back in the second season, because Jameson Williams emerged and became like you were just picking up more yards throwing to Jameson Williams there. So this is just like my worry with the position all the time, is like you can get jumped if you have a more dangerous wide receiver here. And that's why with Tyler Warren, some of these spots where they don't have that second receiver, like the Jets, I think that really stands out to me. But am I even directionally accurate with anything I'm saying there, Charles?
Yeah, you said a lot there, but I do think you're
this is where I'm at with the, like unspooling the brain at this point.
Yeah, I do think you're in the right direction. Like, to me, one of the big things that is always kind of tough for me to parse with tight ends sometimes, like when I'm watching the film, is like, you look at Tyler Warren, or really a lot of these guys, where you talk about like the big slot role, and they can play that in college, where you'll get Tyler Warren or Loveland or Arroyo, the Miami tight end we'll talk about later. If they're matched up like a slot receiver, that's an athletic win like almost every single time. But in the NFL, it's just not that easy. So sometimes like you can get stuck, like you can get enamored with the receiving potential, but if you really can't play in line, then you kind of got to be like a Brock Bowers type. But I don't think it's so bad for Tyler Warren in that respect. So I still think like he's going to be a guy that gets a fair amount of targets year one. It's just going to be, you have to improve some of the inline stuff, because I just don't know. There just aren't many guys that size who can just live in the slot in the NFL. It's just too hard. The guys are too quick. They're too fast. The defenses are too sophisticated.
Yeah, I am definitely sorry for taking us on a little bit of a weird tangent there, but watching Tyler Warren caused me to have a lot of these like meta thoughts about the tight end position, which is always just such a strange one in the NFL. But let's move to Colston Loveland, the consensus kind of second guy in this class. However, Charles, it feels like there's been a bit of a groundswell movement, and it feels like our buddy Nate Tice is maybe the leader of this movement. It's like maybe Colston Loveland is actually the better of the two prospects here. No shade on Warren, but that just might be how good Loveland is as we're projecting him to the NFL. Where do you stand on these two guys, like how they rank together, and just kind of give me your evaluation of Loveland here?
I think it's close. In terms of comparing them to the next level, because honestly, I think if you're just painting like a broad picture of the both of both of them, you kind of come away with some similar takeaways. Where Loveland, just dynamite receiver, like seriously. When he gets the ball, or not when he gets the ball in the hands, but when he starts moving downfield, he's one of those guys where I was like, could you actually play slot receiver in the NFL at like 6'5", 240? Because I know we didn't get any testing times on him, but he's got the speed, man. He's got the athleticism. Yeah. I think he cuts in and out really, really well. And the hands too. I do think a little bit at the catch point, he's a little bit stronger than Tyler Warren. Like I think he's got some more real deal receiver skills there, but man, the blocking, it's for me, it's not where it needs to be. And at like 240, I'm not sure how much more weight like you're trying to gain, because what he's really good at and what's going to get him drafted highly is the receiver ability. So this to me is more just like a philosophical struggle I have sometimes with the tight end prospects that we're getting. Like Brock Bowers, not like he'll try blocking, but it's not great. And I think that same goes for Warren and Loveland. Like I think on Loveland, like on some base blocks, like he'll get tossed out the club, which is something he's got to work on in the NFL. But luckily, it's only 21. He's got time to get stronger. And the receiving ability, I think, is already top notch. Like you kind of with Loveland, you might got to go back to 2023 when they had like an actual quarterback under center to see how talented he actually is. But I think this could be a guy that in year one, just off like the speed and the agility and the receiving skills, can make a big impact.
Yeah, he actually measured at the combine 6'6", so he's even bigger than where he was listed at. So yeah, 6'6", 248 at the NFL scouting combine. So yeah, he's tall. Like that's like Jimmy Graham height. And I mean, dude, Jimmy Graham was like vulturing touchdowns for the Saints a couple of years ago. Like just off that he was still big as hell. So I mean, Colston Loveland's definitely the type of tight end who could be really productive in the NFL. And worth noting too, not only did he not have a quarterback last year, he's also playing with a shoulder injury, which I feel like kind of impacted him as a blocker. Dana Jeremiah made fun of me for this on Mock Draft Monday for like trying to excuse away his blocking and be like, well, he gives effort, like he'll give you effort as a blocker. It's like, okay, well, he gives you effort, but does he actually do it? So I think that's kind of the question with Loveland, because size wise, he looks like he could be that prototypical inline tight end. I think skill set wise actually looks more like he could just filter into that role as opposed to be that big slot. But the ideal type of tight end in today's NFL, Charles, is they can give you the traditional inline stuff and then be flexed out into the slot, which is why I think people are so intrigued with Loveland, because I think he could check those boxes.
Yeah, for him, it's to me, there's just a little bit of projection there in terms of like the consistent inline stuff. But like I said before, I watch his tape and I'm like, man, you could be one of those like guys that's actually big and can play and survive in the slot. Like I would be trying to get him, schemed up touches. I saw Lance Zierlein had on the card another Sam Laporta comp for Loveland. I think it fits here too. Any way you can try to get the ball in his hands in open space and just let him run, that's probably going to be good. But I think he's got enough chops as a receiver and some route running ability where maybe like you can win some one-on-ones early on in your career in the NFL. But I do think early on it might be a little bit of a interesting fit just to see like how you get them on the field all that often, because like NFL defensive ends, it's a different beast, than what you saw last year, and it wasn't always great last year. So teams are going to have to figure out how to mitigate that, but the receiving upside is just, it's really out there.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to get too meta about the tight end position again, but this is the type of guy, like if he can improve that is critical here, because he can be deployed in so many different ways, and you don't want it. What you don't want him to be is like the typical idea from the fantasy bros is, oh well, we don't care about his blocking. It's actually good if he can't block because then he'll just be running routes. But you need the guy to get on the field. And at this point, like teams will throw you off the field to put like a blocking guy in there. I mean, this is what has happened with Dalton Kincaid throughout the course of his career. So I really like Colston Loveland. I actually think I might prefer him just as a receiver a little bit more than Tyler Warren, only because I think from a route perspective, I think he might give you a little more traditional upside there. But yeah, to me, I really like Colston Loveland. I'm excited to see where he lands. Do you have like a potential favorite landing spot for him in the first round this year?
I mean, I feel like there's a handful of teams that could use a tight end. I mean, the Indianapolis fit is not bad.
I'm so anti-Colts first round. I'm so anti-first round tight end for the Colts because they got enough guys that can't get the football to Charles.
Yeah, I don't love it either, but it's something. I don't know because I always struggle to kind of fit tight ends into the first round. Sometimes, like I didn't really see what the fit was for Brock Bowers and who's that? Mike Mayer, who they drafted the year before, and obviously, Mayer had to take some time, and Brock did what he did last year. But I didn't really see that coming before the draft, so I'm not totally sure. Pittsburgh, could that be a fit?
Pittsburgh's interesting. What about the Chargers at 22? Obviously, former coaches there with Jim Harbaugh and the gang, but you don't like that?
Well, I was about to say I don't know, but they did have Roman did coach Mark Andrews, who was obviously part of a big run heavy scheme. So it's not like it'll be totally foreign to them. But I just watched what they did last year, and they were trying to be just so heavy. I worry that maybe he would get relegated to like a shot play guy in that offense as existed last year. But I'm sure just having his presence and having anyone besides Lad McConkey can get open would help a lot. But even that one, like for the role they eventually wanted to be in, you might get some fake Pat Ricard and Level on the field at the same time.
Will Dissly get him in the mix there? I mean, I don't know. It's a bit of an interesting one to project. But all right, we will take our first break here. When we come back, we'll run through some of the other tight ends in the second and third tier right after this.
The Yahoo Sports app is your ultimate draft day companion. With live activities, you can keep up with every pick without even unlocking your phone. Beef up on the incoming rookie class with expert analysis, grades, and prospect breakdowns. Download the Yahoo Sports app right now and get ready for draft night like a pro.
All right, we are back. Charles, let's talk Mason Taylor out of LSU. I've seen some Mason Taylor kind of creeping into the back end of like very, very, very end of the first round mocks lately. Tell me what you think about Mason Taylor, who, is the son of Jason Taylor.
Yeah, Jason and Mason really, really, really thought hard about that one. I like him. I honestly think he might be the most well-rounded tight end in this class. You can just watch him run, and he's not Warren, he's not Loveland, but it's enough, right? I don't think he's going to be one of those big slot types. I think he's more of a classic tight end. So it's funny when you watch him run because I think he's got a good burst off the line, good initial acceleration, but it doesn't always quite, get him where he wants to go all the time. But for his size, I think he played on the screen right here. It's 6'5", 255. He moves like it. He moves like a big classic tight end. I think he blocks a little better than the guys we talked about before. Maybe not the like I said, not the most overwhelming physical profile in terms of speed and agility in the open field, but this is to me is like a pretty classic starting tight end, and he's only 20 years old, so maybe there's room to tap here as far as growth as a blocker, growth in terms of just being more detailed maybe in the run game, but as a baseline here, I think there's a lot to like for Mason Taylor.
Yeah, I really liked him too. I thought he moved well within his routes. Thought he just seemed like a reliable player. kind of like Zach Ertz-ish, maybe. I know we have like the current version of Zach Ertz burned into our brain, but I'm thinking like more early career Zach Ertz, who wasn't always necessarily the most explosive tight end in the NFL, but could create some mismatches, was a big guy, pretty much caught everything thrown his way. That was sort of what stood out to me with Mason Taylor, which I think if you want to take that, maybe I've seen him mocked with the Eagles. So again, Zach Ertz kind of connection here, but even like somewhere in the second round, I feel like Mason Taylor with that skill set would be perfect for a lot of NFL teams.
Yeah, funny. I just typed in Mason Taylor on the Relative Athletic Scores website, and the first comp that came up was Zach Ertz, which I think fits.
There we go.
And the second athletic comp that came up was Tyler Eifert, which is probably Tyler Eifert at his peak was a damn good player.
Dude.
So I think that
I loved Tyler Eifert as like early on in his career. That guy was, he was freaking huge. And I'll never forget, that guy took some shots. I'll never forget like one hit he took in the back of the end zone, like square in the back, where I was like, if I took that hit from an NFL player, I would turn into like, and Thanos snapped his fingers and all the people turned into dust. That's what would happen to me if I took that hit.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I think those are athletically, like those are two pretty standard starting tight ends. Like he's not the fastest guy, but tight end can be like a running back where you don't necessarily have to be the fastest guy. But if you're not gonna be the fastest guy, I think you just gotta play well within the offense and not make many mistakes. And I think he's that kind of player. So I wouldn't be that surprised to see him like at the end of the first round or even in the top 40. I know I've probably said that about a million players this year. But you look at the age, I don't know how much it matters, but it matters to some people. You look at the NFL bloodlines, look at the production. I think that there's a lot to like here. It's just like a high floor starting tight end. I don't know if he's going to be like a superstar, but someone who can come in and block competently and catch against linebackers and safeties and slot guys, that's going to play in an NFL offense, especially coming out of the tight end desert that we were in for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, maybe not the fastest. We showed his stats on the screen earlier, under 10 yards per catch. I wouldn't be surprised if he's kind of that guy where he catches a lot of passes but doesn't make those big plays necessarily. Just one team I wanted to throw out for him, the Seahawks. They have 2 second-round picks. If he slips into that kind of mid second-round range, I feel like that's a good spot for him because they probably want like more of a traditional inline presence where I've seen, and I've discussed this with people on the show, like the Colston Loveland to the Seahawks thing. Yeah, I think Loveland is a guy that could be an inline player, but it feels like Taylor's a little bit more out of the box, ready to be that guy. Again, they have 2 second-round picks. They have their pick at 18. The Steelers pick at 20. Maybe they take a guy like Mason Taylor at one of those 2 spots because it does feel like they want to have more of that like traditional in-line presence. Let's go to our next guy here, which is Elijah Arroyo, one of Cam Ward's teammates at Miami. He wasn't quite Xavier Restrepo in terms of the production, but he was a pretty productive player for Miami last year. Tell me what you like about Elijah Arroyo.
He's smooth, man. It's really, really good athlete. And I think I thought that he and Cam played well off of each other last year because Cam's going to be a big risk taker at times down the field. And I thought Arroyo did a good job on some of those plays of getting up there. And I don't know if bailing out's the right word, but going up there and making a tough catch. It's funny. Like as I started looking at some of these tight end prospects, I was like, man, this guy only had 35 catches. Like he's pretty athletic, but I know he was banged up last year.
Yeah.
We'll see like where he's at coming into his rookie season. But I think just like as a receiver, there's a lot to like here. Like some of those plays that where he's moving down the field and he's running routes against like corners and safeties, he looks like a real wide receiver. I think he's got incredible like ball tracking, hand-eye coordination, whatever you want to call it, to kind of bring some of these passes in. I think as a receiver, I really like this guy. I don't know if he's like once he catches the ball, like going to be super explosive all the time, but he's going to catch the ball. He's going to make some tough catches. And I think with his frame and his route running ability, that kind of plays well for the next step.
Yeah, he definitely seems like a mismatched tight end to me. 6'5", 250, with an 88th percentile wingspan, according to Mock Draftable. And like, I feel like you see that when you watch him too. The athleticism definitely shows up. I love him, maybe not the quickest twitch guy, like in and out of breaks, but if you can get him on like a big runway, again, maybe not the first read in the progression, but like you get him crossing all the way across the field. It's crossing across the field. No kidding. Duh. And you can get him open there. I think that actually plays pretty well for a guy like Elijah Arroyo. I'm not sure like what type of offense that is. Like, again, with Mason Taylor, it was kind of easy for me to find like a traditional Shanahan offense fit. For Arroyo, it would just maybe be a guy that I think he could be a guy, especially he's coming back from injuries too. It might take like a year or two of development for him to kind of get caught on here.
Yeah. To me, it's kind of interesting because when you watch him play, he gets, especially like on deeper routes down the field, he'll get open, but doesn't always have like the greatest yak or like the intermediate and deeper portions of the field. But that's fine because he'll bring those passes in. I think what's really impressive about him as like a ball carrier is they would get him in on the screen game every once in a while. And I thought he just saw the field really well and was able to get down the field and make plays. So I'm really excited about him. As far as the NFL goes, probably need to pair him with, maybe not quite a Mercedes Lewis type, but someone who's going to do a lot of the dirty work, because I think he's at this point, he's just more receiver than he is like full on tight end sometimes.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Again, it's kind of hard to find that fit necessarily, but I do think he makes for an interesting option there. Maybe a guy to groom like in San Francisco behind George Kittle, but I mean, that seems kind of like a luxury pick for them, and they need to just hit the trenches. Let's go to the next guy here on the list, which is Harlod Fannin Jr. What an interesting player Harlod Fannin is, man. He's at a Bowling Green. He led the FBS with over 1,500 receiving yards this year, so the production is outrageous. But I don't know, Charles. I'm laughing because he kind of runs funny, right?
Yeah.
On film. He runs funny on film. He measures in at 241 at the NFL Scouting Combine, which is a 9th percentile weight for a tight end, according to Mock Draftable. And then he runs the 4.740. Not ideal. So slow. Small hands, smaller than you think overall. But again, super productive. And I say he runs weird, but the film is somewhat impressive here. So Charles, what the hell's the deal with Harlod Fannin?
Man, I thought his season was pretty cool because sometimes you just watch a team. I get kind of like Tyler Warren, where they're like, all right, man, we got one guy. All right, Harold, prepare yourself, because you are about to eat these targets. I said this on Football 301, and I felt better about it after the combine once I could put the numbers next to each other. But he reminded me of like Aaron Hernandez. Well, I know on the field, but you're talking about 6'2", 240. His combine was pretty similar to Aaron Hernandez. Going back to Florida, I thought Harrod was a little more explosive than he showed at the combine. I was a little surprised by the 4.71, but I still like him. I understand he's not like the maybe like the top 40 pick. I thought when I was not tuning into Bowling Green games, but like catching his highlights after each week when he would have a monster stat line. But this is still like a really, really quality player. I think even with the 4.71, just does some really cool things with the ball in his hands. He's a tough runner. He's got a little elusiveness, kind of like Aaron did. But it's a working comp, because even Harrod, like Tyler Warren and like Aaron Hernandez, got some carries at Bowling Green last year and did some damage on them. So I think there's a lot of ways that you can use him. And I think as a ball carrier, he showed his worth last year at Bowling Green, which is going to be important because at 6'2", 240, you're not the most physically imposing guy. So it's probably going to be more about scheme touches and what you can do with the ball in his hands. And I think there's still enough there to at least like, invest like a top 100 pick with him. I think that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to keep bringing up Aaron Hernandez here, but just looked it up. 6'2", 245, and 4.64 at his pro day for Aaron Hernandez. So we're kind of in the Harlod Fannin range there. So you're a brave guy for making that comp, Charles. But I think it does from an athletic profile standpoint. I guess it holds up. And shoot, man, I mean, I agree with you that like top 100 pick on this guy for sure, because he was so productive and like in a weird way, I don't know. I've kind of heard people describe it as like he looks like he's got like duck feet, right? Like they're pointed out like that, and at some points, like he kind of uses that to his advantage to snap off routes. So I don't know. He strikes me as a pretty clean player, a guy who can run routes really downfield. I've heard I don't know. What do you think about like an Isaiah Likely comparison? Because that's one I've heard from people too. And Likely was a guy who did not test well as an athlete, but has been like a real deal outlet receiver and like big play guy for the Baltimore Ravens. So I feel like Harlod Fannin is someone that is going to pop up as a receiver like in our lives at some point here as an NFL receiving tight end.
Yeah, I think maybe he's a little bit of a dice roll because you don't have the great athletic like the super like overwhelming athletic traits, but it's a cliche, but I just think he's a really good football player. It's going to have to be like some design stuff. I don't know if he's like consistently quick enough to win as a slot receiver, but even like if you go watch his game versus Penn State, he's making some guys who will be NFL players look pretty silly, and I just really like what he can do with the ball in his hand. Like come on, in the NFL he's probably not ever going to be a 120 catch guy with all those yards, but still like a key piece of a good offense, I think.
Yeah, a couple landing spots I'd throw out there. The Rams, if they don't make a big move in the first round for a tight end, which is probably unlikely, just that's like a weird little fantasy thing I've come up with. But I think them in the third round, that could be a nice little spot for Harlod Fannin. They do plenty of stuff to design their tight end targets, screens, like kind of leak out routes and stuff like that. That would be a really good spot for him. Denver is looking for a tight end. I mean, they're just looking for playmakers all over the place. That's definitely a spot where he could make an impact. Sean Payton loves these kind of like weird little project players, so I feel like that's a good fit for him. So those are a couple spots that maybe Harlod Fannin could reach his best potential. Any other guys worth hitting on in this range? We've got Terrence Ferguson out of Oregon, Gunnar Helm out of Texas. Those are two of the guys I think people should be aware of. Ferguson is like the athlete type that typically falls under the radar and can develop in the NFL.
Yeah, Ferguson, he's got some fans from people that I've talked to. Like you said, I think the big upside as a developmental guy, it's kind of hard to describe sometimes, but sometimes you just watch a guy, you're like, yeah, that looks like, what an NFL tight end should look like, even if it's not the way polished. So I think Ferguson fits in that realm. And someone Nate shouted out today was Mitchell Evans from Notre Dame. Obviously, Notre Dame did not have the greatest passing game this year, but I did go actually like really literally in between pods. I went to go check some stuff out from Mitchell Evans, the Notre Dame tight end, and I liked it. He's like if you missed out on Mason Taylor, maybe on day 3 you go get Mitchell Evans. Kind of that's kind of how I would describe him in a quick summation. There we go.
Well, God knows Nate spent enough time watching Notre Dame's passing game with his boy Riley Leonard, so he's definitely an expert on all things Notre Dame. Terrence Ferguson, by the way, just to come back to him, 90th percentile 10-yard split, 83rd percentile 40-yard dash, 86th percentile broad jump, decent height. So, I mean, that looks like one of those under the radar tight ends who could be productive. Hey, how about this? Future Dallas Cowboys tight end Terrence Ferguson, some of his athletic comparables on Mock Draftable: Luke Schoonmaker, Peyton Hendershot, these like classic Big Ten these classic Big Ten tight ends where Dallas just throws a little dart throw at them and they have like a little moment there. So here you go. This is your next Cowboys like weird tight end who once Jake Ferguson moves on, will just slide into the starting role and give us some production.
Yeah, I mean, but who they have the Texans side? Dalton Schultz before that. I mean, Yeah, just the conveyor belt.
Yep, Dalton. It went Dalton Schultz to 6'5" guy, Dalton Schultz to Jake Ferguson to Terrence Ferguson. I feel like there was a guy before that's also in the pipeline that I can't remember. But yeah, this is the Dallas Cowboys like weird tight end pipeline.
Yeah. So next one up. Shoot, if I know that if Jerry's watching this tape, which I know he is, he's probably in love because he looks just like all the other tight ends he's drafted.
Oh, dude, Jerry is a huge fan of the show. He particularly a fan of yours, Charles. I've heard on the yacht, they're just watching like Charles McDonald on YouTube and just being like, this guy really knows his stuff.
Yeah, I did sit with Jerry at the Senior Bowl one year for a good like 20 minutes, watching Tanner Lee practice, the old Nebraska quarterback, and he was not kind.
So yeah, see, you guys are.
It wasn't a good practice for Tanner Lee. It wasn't good practice for Tanner Lee. I'll say that. Yeah, just to be fair.
No, definitely. If you say so, I'll take your word. Gunnar Helm out of Texas, just the last guy here to note. Very productive at Texas. They kind of at times ran the offense through him, despite the fact that they had a bunch of NFL receivers there. Did not test like a good athlete, but according to reports, he injured himself during that 40-yard dash. So maybe somebody to keep an eye out for a good size here with him. Definitely somebody to have on the radar, but might be more of a third day guy. All right, we're going to take our next break. When we come back, Charles, we got to talk about some real football players. Enough of these guys who catch passes. We'll talk some offensive linemen right after this break. All right, we are back. Let's talk through the offensive lineman here at Charles McDonald. Let's start at the top with Will Campbell. Listen, we talked about Will Campbell at the Combine, Charles, where we were confused as to how it went from everybody talking about Jaden Daniels last year. Like, oh, man, he's playing with like this great left tackle, going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. And then all of a sudden it was, well, maybe Will Campbell's a guard. It feels like we've kind of chilled out on that since his arms measured in much better at his pro day. But where are we at with Will Campbell? Do you still view him as, I mean, I know it's so stupid, but where do you view? Go ahead.
What was up with that? Like all the offensive linemen coming in with longer arms. Like we can't standardize this. Do we need like a doctor to come out there? It's weird.
Bro, I feel like everybody had like longer arms at their pro day. Not even just offensive linemen, but everybody who was measuring the arms at Indianapolis. Did they have a bad day? Like they get after it? Were they at prime too late the night before? Like what's the deal?
Maybe.
You gotta look into this.
Yeah, I don't really know what's going on here. Although I can attest from some late prime nights that you're liable to lose some limbs in there if you say they're too late for sure.
That is a fair point. Okay, let's talk Will Campbell, who I think is just looks like a really, really good offensive lineman. But do you believe he could be a guy that sticks out at tackle?
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is kind of a case of like just getting bored with guys because Will Campbell's been starting at left tackle for LSU since he was a freshman. Like you don't just get to do that at LSU unless you're really good. But this is a guy like kind of like Brock Bowers since he was since he stepped foot on LSU's campus. Everyone's like, oh yeah, that's a first round tackle. And then, I guess as the season goes on, we're like, is he a guard? I'm like, no, man, this guy's a tackle. He's not. Maybe it's not like the 100% ideal arm length, but like he checks off every single other box. I think to me he's just set it, forget it, left tackle. If you're worried about the arm length, I would just say look at the tape, look at the agility drills that he ran, look at the 40 time. Like this is a really good move. Like if you're not going to have super duper elite length, if you can stay in front of a guy, that's good enough. Like what we're going for here is just to get the quarterback 2-3 seconds to throw that ball. So I think he can do that. I like a lot of the work he does in the run game. Just a really, really clean player to me. I quite honestly think people just got bored of because he's been in the limelight for so long.
Yeah, really good player. He's even said, I've had these arms all my life and I've been a really good football player. I mean, I get it. Like, obviously some teams have thresholds, they have these concerns, but he's a good football player, man. Just looks like a guy that you could lock in at left tackle and just kind of never think about that position for the next 10 years. If you're the Patriots at 4 and, the draft goes as we think it will go, it's going to go Cam Ward at 1, Travis Hunter at 2. After hearing Andrew Berry talking about Travis Hunter like he's already on the team, also weirdly talking about Jalen Milroe like he's already on the team. That's on my radar. I was like, I kind of had a moment, Charles, where I was like, did I just fall asleep for a week and a half and these are the post-draft presser quotes? But
God, I wish.
I don't want to give you any ideas. Don't fall asleep for a week, Charles. We need you out in LA for the draft show. But I had that thought as I was listening to Andrew Berry talk about that. But anyway, so it's going to go Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter. 4th overall. If you're the Patriots, you just turn in the car for Will Campbell there?
Yeah, I would like either him or Membou. To me, the Missouri offensive tackle, those two guys I think are kind of no-brainers at offensive tackle, and they certainly could use the help. Look, it's not the sexiest pick in the world, I'm sure, or I've seen some Patriots fans say they want Ashton Jeanty, but this is something that will make your offense a whole lot better. What? I know. Come on. I know.
No, come on, man. Like, we had this is the whole conversation we had with Danny Heifetz on the last show. Some of these teams, you got to eat your vegetables. You got to get your protein in before you can be looking at the dessert. Yes. That is the Patriots eating some dessert before dinner. And you are not at that point in your team building process.
No. And the thing is, they already got the quarterback. Like Drake right. May, I feel so certain that he's going to be one of them ones at quarterback. Even last year, like I think if I recall correctly, he finished like 13th in EPA per dropback by the end of the season, which is incredible given what he was working with. So to me, that's a guy where you probably focus on the trenches first. I know it can be sexy to say, oh man, we got Drake May. Let's find like a big time, offensive skill player to put him with, but just stabilize the offense, the offensive line first, because you were really not great there. You probably don't want to do that again. And it's just such a clean, easy fit that I really don't see why you would go in any other direction other than to maybe trade down. Or if Travis Hunter falls to 4, then you take him.
Yeah, but he's not. He's already a Cleveland Brown, so sorry about that. But all right, let's go to Armand Membou here, the next guy kind of on the list. As I've said about Membou throughout the entire process, Charles, even if you don't like watching offensive line play, which you should, watching offensive line play is great. If you love the sport, how do you not like watching offensive linemen? I'm not even on this is a fantasy show, so there's probably some people who don't care about the offensive line, but you should. It's important. Half the reason these guys don't score all the fantasy points as you want is because the offensive line stinks. But if you don't like watching offensive linemen, you're still going to like watching Armand Membou, Charles, because he's so aggressive and the movement skills are so impressive. You're going to like this guy. So I'm a big fan of his, and there's a couple spots I think he would be excellent at. What do you think of Armand Membou?
Oh, I love his tape. I love his tape. He's so good. I mean, the crazy thing about him, I know it says on the screen 6'3", 314, but he's actually 6'4", 330, which is like, dude, if you watch him play, it doesn't make sense like that someone that he weighs that much, because I was surprised when he weighed in that much of the combine, because he carries it so well. He moves so well. Everything that you saw at the combine backs that up. I mean, again, 332 pounds, 4.9 40-yard dash, 1.7 10-yard split, 34-inch vertical jump. That's just explosion right there. And he's a smart player. He's a physical player. I think he's kind of like Tristan Wirfs, where you could start him off at right tackle and then switch him to left tackle, because I think he's got the athleticism for it. To me, this is this might be the best offensive tackle in the class. I go back and forth between him and Will Campbell, but I think just like Will Campbell, this is kind of set it and forget it. Super duper duper high upside offensive tackle.
Yeah, love it. Big fan of his. Jets and Raiders, to me, those are the spots like they should be ready to turn that card in. Raiders are interesting, man. I had this thought, and I've been kind of kicking this around with people. Like, if you're the Raiders and you want to build this great run game, do you build it better by throwing, the 6th pick at Ashton Genty, or do you take Membou at 6 and maybe take a running back like one of the Ohio State guys or anyone from this rather deep class on day 2, day 3, and which one builds you a better run game? And now we've got reports that Colton Miller is not going to show up to offseason activities because he's not happy with his contract. So tackle might be an even bigger need, but either way, like, they could really use him at right tackle and make this offense pretty interesting right away.
Yeah, I think anytime you're looking at where the Raiders were in terms of running the ball last year, like, for the first 10 or 11 weeks, it was quite literally one of the worst rushing games in the history of the NFL.
Yes.
I don't think a running back is fixing that. Like, that's really tough for any running back to come in and just, we ran for like 3 yards to carry, but I'm going to fix that. No, it means you probably got some big structural problems that you need to fix. So I think taking offensive tackle makes so much sense. Like, I've seen all the Genty connections. It just doesn't make sense to me at 6 for them. I think they just need to get more stable up front and then dip back in that day 2 running back pool, because there's so many guys there. You can still find a hit there, but you got to shore up that offensive line at the top of the draft, I think.
Let's talk Kelvin Banks out of Texas. Is he a guy that we say is more of a tackle or a guard here, Charles? I think he's one that there's been some debate about.
I think he's a tackle. I would give him a chance to play left tackle. I don't really see why people say he's got to play guard. I think for his size, like, he's not as you look at like Membou and Will Campbell. I don't think he's quite as agile as those guys, but still for his size, plenty agile enough. Like, when you're talking about like your playing weight is at 315, 320, 325, you can jump back and get into a pass set and mirror pass rushers. That's damn good athleticism right there. So I don't really think he needs to play guard. I think he could play guard. I think he's strong enough and powerful enough to play guard. But I think left tackle first. Give him a shot there. I think he's got some good enough pass protection traits where he deserves a chance. But if he can't do it, or you just decide it's too big of a burden on the offense, you can kick him inside and probably have a damn good guard too.
Yeah, there's just too many teams that need tackles, and I think he's got reasonably decent movement skills and like good feet to just try out as a tackle in his own scheme. Miami, obviously, maybe at 13th overall is a little early for him, but they need tackle help so bad, and I think that's the type of offense where he could potentially be a really nice fit at left tackle. Let's talk Josh Simmons here out of Ohio State, who looked like he was going to moonwalk to be a top 10 pick maybe in this year's draft, and then he has that injury this past season. But Josh Simmons, what do we like about his game, Charles, and where do we think he fits best?
Oh man, if he was healthy, there's a chance he's like in the OT1 discussion, I think, because that's one of those guys where you look at him and you watch him play and you watch him move. It doesn't really seem like someone that big should be able to be as fluid as he is. But just a crazy athlete. I struggle where to peg him because I'm not a doctor. When I hear patellar tendon tear, that sounds really serious to me. I still see people put him in the first round. I don't know what to do with that. So probably you're looking at like later first, early second round, a potential stash pick. But if you can get back to full strength, like that's a day one starting left tackle that I think would be just an absolute weapon in like teams that love to run zone stuff and try to get their guys to the next level. That is where I think he would really excel, because just watch some of the stuff earlier in the season where he's healthy and how he moves in space. Like, he really looks like a tight end out there sometimes. And hopefully he can get that juice back, because when he's healthy, he's a really special player.
He was out there doing some stuff at Ohio State's Pro Day, so I feel like if you want to keep the candle lit for him, maybe that's a nice little something to look at there. There's also been some like I don't know how much I want to take stock in this, but like rumbles about his like personality and character concerns and stuff like that. I don't know about all that, and maybe that enough if this team doesn't love him is enough to make this not happen because they're clearly trying to quote clean up the culture of their offensive line room last year. But I just feel like a team like the Texans, man, they signed Cam Robinson in the offseason. Cam Robinson obviously is not a solution. Right at left tackle long term, but he's a body. He's somebody who can play. Yeah, well, also not, but like maybe, but maybe short, maybe very short term. Charles, like if you take Josh Simmons in the first round, and you can just start Cam Robinson out, and then eventually throw him out there as the left tackle. Titus Howard's probably your right tackle. I don't know. Maybe it's something that could work here if you're just looking, because again, maybe if Simmons is not ready to start the season, you're working him in a little slow. I think that's a spot that maybe makes sense for him.
Boy, I think it's a move that makes sense for them because the Texans, they've spammed a lot of offensive linemen this offseason. I'm not sure they've actually gotten better, like
they've added guys from like two of the worst offensive lines in the league last year, like Laken Tomlinson from the Seahawks, one of the worst offensive lines in the league, Cam Robinson and Ed Ingram from the Vikings. That offensive line became an issue at the end of the year.
Yeah, and they've had guys like Titus Howard, who's been very, very up and down. Blake struggled, so I think they have enough recent investments where you could actually stash him. And you wouldn't have to play due to your recent commitments. But you, like you said, some of these fixes could be very, very short term. So hopefully in this scenario, he'd be back up and running as fast as possible because I think this offensive line, they need him to start. It's kind of interesting. Like they've spent a whole lot of assets on the offensive line, but I don't think they have a difference maker yet. Like you said, you add Cam Robinson, Laken Tomlinson. Okay. With the guys you had, the non-Laramie Tunsil guys you had, and look, I know Laramie had a ton of penalties last year, to the point it was just totally unacceptable. But blocking wise, he was still definitely your best offensive lineman. That's a big loss. Not sure you've replaced it, but Simmons would have the potential to grow into that at least.
Yeah, no question about that. That's what makes him like an interesting fit with that Texans team. All right, I'm going to give you three guys here just to hit on real quick before we get out of here. Tyler Booker, the big, not that impressive athletic guard in terms of the NFL scouting combine. Gray Zabel, a guy who people think can maybe move into center. And then Josh Connerly out of Oregon, who is Mike Tice's favorite offensive lineman in the draft, according to the Football 301 episode he did with Nate, which was pretty cool. Definitely, if people have not listened to that episode, definitely go check that out. That was one of the cooler ones to see Nate chopping it up with his dad, who, of course, was an offensive line coach in the NFL in addition to being a head coach. So those three guys, Charles, I feel like all of them are candidates to go in the first round in this year's draft.
Yeah, definitely. I really like Tyler Booker from Alabama, and it's you have to be realistic, I think, because it's a very clear fit, a very clear role for him. Like he is a guard only, not a center, not a tackle. And my dream is like the Ravens draft him, and you just have this power run game, and you are just obliterating people because for people who are maybe worried about the combine stuff, go watch that Oklahoma game. I know it was kind of a disaster for the rest of the offense, but man, he had some incredible blocks where he was just completely overwhelming guys at the point of attack. And it's just honestly insane to see. Like, yeah, maybe not if you're running like a heavy outside zone scheme, probably not your guy. But if you are running gap for a big old running back, this is who you want. Then you have Gray Zabel, or I think Nate said Zabel. I'm actually not sure how to pronounce his name now. Like I have some doubts now. I'm going to keep calling him Gray Zabel. Gray Zabel.
Zabel sounds way better. So
yeah, I agree. From North Dakota State. Just I think it's hilarious that they keep getting some of these guys every once in a while. Like you'll just have one of the some freak athlete, whether it's a quarterback or in this case an offensive lineman, or Christian Watson's case a wide receiver. They just have like some freak on their roster every once in a while. And Zabel's another one. I don't know if he's going to play left tackle in the NFL, but I do think he could play literally all 4 other spots. Center might be a little dicey because he's tall, he's 6'6".
Yeah,
it's kind of tough at center. But if you punch in, on the Relative Athletic Scores website, Raz.football, one of his first comps is Mitch Morse, which kind of made me think like, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting because Mitch was a taller center who at his prime was a good player and made it work. So, if you draft Zabel, you might not know where to put him when you draft him, but that's okay because I think he's a day one starter at left guard through right tackle, could play left tackle in the pinch. Like I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up going top 20 when it's all said and done.
Yeah, Zabel, man. I mean, the Seahawks and Vikings are 2 teams to easily connect with him because they're kind of these zone-heavy teams. We think that's what the Seahawks are going to be. And they obviously both have a need in the interior offensive line. The Vikings brought in the Colts bros, Will Fries and Ryan Kelly, which maybe signals they might want to go to more of a power run game. So maybe Zabel doesn't fit there necessarily. But Seahawks seems like an obvious fit. But there are just so many teams that run that like outside zone stuff that could really use a guy like this. So that would be helpful. And Josh Connerly, man, I do think he's risen. Certainly seems like the league is a little bit higher, maybe sees a little bit more of what Mike sees in him. So I think he's going to come off the board in the first round is Josh Connerly. And there's plenty of teams in the back half of the first round that need offensive tackle help. I mean, we talked about the Texans. I mean, just the Commanders, maybe if they want to stick him at right tackle. I know they're probably going to have to pay Laramie Tunsil a bunch of money because that's the Laramie Tunsil plan. And if he gets 31, he's just going to be the Chiefs' left tackle. Like that's the floor, I feel like, for him. So to me, I just feel like there's no way he gets out of the first round.
Yeah. Ooh, sorry, excuse me. Yeah, he could go maybe top half of the first round when it's all said and done.
Sure.
There's a whole lot of upside here to tap into, and the cool thing with him is for a player who I don't think he turns 22 until like halfway through his rookie year. He's got a lot of like good technical baseline skills for playing left tackle, which I think is a good sight to see because give you a little bit of a higher floor for starting in the NFL. I do think he's got to get stronger, but the technique is really good. You can't coach the athleticism that he has. He was one of the fastest offensive linemen at the combine to go along with Membou. So he's one of those guys, like when you start going through it, it's just checking off a lot of boxes and you're like, wait, why do I have him at in the second round? Why do I have him like late first? Because I think this is a guy who has a chance to go in maybe like the top 16, top 15. We mocked him to San Francisco in one of our mock drafts. I think that's a good fit for him and them and the upside that he brings because eventually they're going to need a replacement for Trent Williams. Maybe he could potentially grow into that role. But high floor, high ceiling, I think there's a lot to like with that kid.
I love that pick, and I love anything that helps the 49ers offensive line get a little bit better because that is certainly a unit that needs the help. Charles, I always appreciate your help this time of year doing this prospect deep dive series, but that is a wrap, buddy. We previewed the quarterbacks, the running backs, the wide receivers, and today we did tight ends and offensive linemen. Finished with some real football players, Charles, so I hope that, if there's any little bit of your soul left, it feels a little bit better after all this offensive lineman talk.
No, I do feel good. I'll feel good until we start back up next year with the skill guys, but it was good to end on this note.
I hope it was a little bit more enjoyable than how you just painted it, but
no, it was because we got a good running back class. Tight ends are also real football players. Running backs and tight ends are real football players. It's really just
so it's just the receivers,
cornerbacks, quarterbacks.
Got it.
7-on-7 guys.
Got it. So like the highest paid players in the sport.
Correct.
Those are those are the ones that are just dragging the product down. I understand where
you said it.
Now I see where you're. No. I'm saying, I'm obviously saying in a sarcastic voice, implying that is what you are saying. So don't put the words in my mouth. I'm the president of Big Receiver. Okay. I'm the leading lobbyist for Big Receiver. So let's get that straight. But Charles, I appreciate you, buddy. This is always a blast. It's going to be great to see you next week in LA for the draft show. So people out there, as I said at the top, download the Yahoo Sports app. and be ready to watch this thing on the app. You can watch it on YouTube. You can do all the things. Charles and I are going to be chopping it up with Nate and Fitz. It's going to be an absolute blast. But for today's show, that is going to do it, and that's going to be a wrap on the Prospect Deep Dive series. But we have one last mock draft Monday. We wrap it all up on Monday. We have a great guest to do it with. The Athletic's Dane Brugler is going to stop by and share his favorite fits from his latest mock draft and who he is standing on the table for this year. Until then, we are out.